weeks training?
Really?
More or less.
Still gonna need that car. Salute.
Salud.
No Time to Die.
So many memories from that.
I can't even begin to thank you enough as a fan, just of movies, but also of James Bond, what you added to the character, the way you like reinvigorated the franchise, the fact that when you made him extra human. And I think this last one, people are going to flip for your performance. I thought maybe...
Can we have a drink now?
I had to. I'd be honored to share a cheers to a martini with you. Mr. Bond, Mr. Craig, thank you for everything.
Cheers to you.
15 years.
Oh, that's not bad.
No, not bad.
That's not bad.
Daniel Craig, No Time to Die.
I mean, it was so odd going into it because we knew that Madeline was going to be in it. So that's something like, all right, well, how's that going to work? We knew Blofeld was going to be in it, but he's in prison. So I assumed he'd have to escape. Obviously, you can't. How can you have your main villain in a prison for the film? Well, how is that going to work? And then we have a new villain altogether in Safin, who was ostensibly the most interesting thing for me going into it. Who is this guy? We don't know how he fits in. And yeah, Felix is back. So there's so much going on. I'll start with Steve. What were you worried about No Time to Die, or did you get an inkling that they were going to sort of say, "What the heck? Anyone can die. We can just finish this series once and for all"?
I mean, I personally, when obviously Spectre was supposed to be James, but Daniel Craig's swan song, that it was supposed to be his last film. It ended quite nicely. It could have been left there. The same way I think his tenure could have ended in Skyfall as well. It was quite a nice ending. So obviously Daniel Craig had came out and done some interviews saying that he'd rather slit his wrist than do another Bond, and then all of a sudden he's doing another Bond. So you think maybe there's more money in it, or maybe he's got some creative input in it, which he did. But my main thoughts when I started to look into No Time to Die was, right, they've brought back Blofeld. So is Safin Dr. No? That was my first. Is it going to be, are they going to do it again and they're just going to have Safin as Dr. No?
The thing that no one wants to admit is that most people want things to happen to them. We tell each other lies about the fight for free will and independence, but we don't really want that. We want to be told how to live and then die when we are not looking. People want oblivion, and a few of us are born to build it for them. So here I am, their invisible god, sneaking under their skin.
Obviously, I was excited because there was another Bond film coming out. I'm a big Daniel Craig fan, so I'd be happy to watch him play the character again. Yeah, initially I was thinking, right, is this just going to be Daniel Craig's version of Dr. No? You know, they seem to have taken from everything apart from Dr. No, so why not stick him in a Sunbeam Alpine and do that as well? Yeah.
I think one day we might find out that was one of the intentions, perhaps. There's references to Doctor, isn't there, to Safin?
Exactly. And obviously, you know, he was disfigured, and I think his initial the pictures of the characters that were released, he was wearing gloves and all this sort of stuff. So people were thinking, yeah, this is definitely Dr. No. And it wouldn't have surprised me if that was the way they went.
Because I don't want another, you know, Joseph Wiseman was brilliant. I don't want to see somebody else doing Goldfinger. I don't want to see, do you know what I mean, as we go on? Yes, this is a different universe to the other films, but you can still be original. You can still have their own villains. Fair enough, Blofeld works because every Blofeld was different, weren't they? In the Sean, the Sean Connery and Lazenby days, they were just everyone was completely different. So I think that's okay for me. But yeah, oh gosh, I mean we've talked about this to death, haven't we? But I suppose we can just sort of say, do you think it's a fitting conclusion for Daniel Craig? That would be the main thing I'd ask you guys.
I've always said, obviously we know what happens in the ending. I've always said that the character Bond he was, if you've read any of the background in the John Pearson book and whatnot, his parents died in a climbing accident. He was a bit lost. He was an orphan. He went to school. He got into trouble in school, but then he joined the Navy. So you could say that the Navy made Bond. And then if you think about the end of No Time to Die, who was it that actually destroyed Bond? It was the Royal Navy.
Mm,
So I've always said that I quite like that sort of full circle with the fact that the Navy had made Bond and it also destroyed him.
Interesting.
even more sad.
Yeah, yeah, um, I also, I mean, I like. I'm just gonna say, I like Spectre. I like No Time to Die. People want Bond to survive, but I don't think he did survive. There's no way anyone could
No.
survive. I just don't know why the actual 007, who's on the payroll, didn't go and do the mission and let this poor man just get on with his family, get on
Yeah.
the boat. You take them to safety, and
Yeah.
I got them. This might come in handy.
Thank you.
or if they didn't want to destroy the island, just kill the buyers that are coming to buy the product, and then you buy them a bit more time.
I think it goes back to the writing, though, doesn't it? The initial idea is Bond's going to die. How do we do it?
Well, I think that was a lot of Daniel Craig's input as well. That was what he wanted. So, and it is, I like Daniel Craig, but it was quite sad that he had such sort of power over the direction of the franchise to sort of like the exclusion of everyone else. It was almost like that was part of his deal. This is what I'm going to do with this character. And if you don't let me do it, then I'm not going to do this film.
Yeah. That's
You
ultimately
know.
what happened, it seems, isn't it?
Mm.
Because Spectre did have that, it wasn't until this sort of era that a Bond actor is even allowed an ending. They just, sorry, we move on. We've already planned the next film. So
Yeah.
to have that Spectre, that would have been the biggest ending a Bond actor had, wouldn't it?
Mm.
So to
Well,
have
to
two,
actually drive off into the sunset. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
My first viewing of it was unpleasant. And as in even just the experience, because it was like COVID. I'd missed going to it with you guys. I had to go by myself, so I watched it alone. And obviously, what happens in the film is depressing. Um, and I think it's a real mess of intentions and motivations, and I do think ultimately Craig having a bit too much power and say so with what ends up happening. I think in terms of the structure and direction, in terms of who's the villain, that's all quite messy and underwhelming in the end. And it made me feel really quite sad and angry. Really, I'll be honest with you. When I saw it, I've only seen it twice. When I saw it at the cinema, I was really angry, and then we watched it with Dad. A lot of what do you reckon? 2 or 3 years after its release, just in our living room together, us three brothers and Dad. And I could see how it worked well as a film in terms of convincing you and kind of manipulating you as an audience to try and think that this is right and this makes sense, that Bond has a child, and it's sad at the end that he dies, and I can just see how it works for some people. But then again, I just went away feeling angry that you can do that with Bond fans, and you can do that with Bond, and you can just make it into a kind of a cinema superhero film. I really struggle with it. I mean, for me, I'm trying to think about this whole kind of Craig journey, because I don't think it even is that it doesn't fit Daniel Craig's Bond. I think it in terms of what was trying to happen be established with Casino Royale. I think it's just by this point it's all out of control, with Craig having too much influence, really. And like so his films, I would like compare to going up a mountain, basically. Like Casino Royale, you're starting a new adventure, it's exciting, but you quickly learn that you're in for, it's quite hard work, but it's worth it. You're doing something good, kind of. You're trying to anyway. And then Quantum of Solace, there's like a torrential downpour, but you're still making progress. Skyfall, you get to the top and think, actually, we're in a good place, good view, can see where we've come. and that you should be, we're happy where we are. And then for me, Spectre and No Time to Die. Spectre's like the slowest, most uninspiring walk down a hill, and then No Time to Die for me was just like when you're absolutely knackered, just someone coming and beating you up when you're there. When you've got no energy left, and like I've said before, convincing you that because you're so tired, all right, yeah, I don't mind getting beaten up. Like, just all right, just have me. I think it's just like it takes you on a real journey. These five films, and I think by the end, it's pretty bad that it makes you want that this is at all an outcome that should be considered.
You have all the time in the world.
Is anyone okay with the ending? Or
There are people, like I've said, casual viewers, people at work who feel really emotional by the ending, love it, love Daniel Craig's Bond, and that really made them weep and stuff. So for some people, again, they do like it.
I'm not casual, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah, sorry, yeah.
How dare you, Harry?
Yeah.
Go
But
on,
as in,
Ken.
it's important to know the casual viewers, isn't it? As in, like, it does work for a lot of.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to just Craig has had a major influence on just the culture as a whole. Just like when people like, I kind of put him up there. He's one of the big three, I think. Like when people think of Bond, it's either like Connery, Moore. I think Craig is at the top of that. I think he's in that forefront, and I think that's why a lot of people. I think it worked for a lot of folks.
I know.
Yeah, for me, I think it worked. And I kind of think I think it does kind of fit with his character as well that we see in Casino Royale, just because you see this guy who's getting into this world, and then he meets this woman who's asking him, and just like, how can you do this? Are you sure this is who you are? Just because you've done something doesn't mean you have to keep doing it. He's meeting a woman who's questioning his life choices, and he's thinking to himself, like, maybe I do want something other than this life, which isn't out of character, I think, for Bond as a whole, not even just Craig's Bond. Because we see that with, Lazenby. We see that with, the literary Bond with just wanting to get out of this, and or even Dalton, with tell him what you like. If he fires me, I'll thank him for it. Like there's something he wants more than this life. And then when Vesper betrays him and she dies, I think he just kind of goes on this journey of like, well, this is my life, whatever, I'm going to go all in. And then he meets Madeline again, and this another woman who questions him and says, like, is this what you want? Like that is one thing I failed to mention in the Spectre talk is I do like that train conversation, because it is an echo of Casino Royale, where you have
Yeah.
the women that he ultimately falls for calling him out and saying, there's more to this. You're better than this. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And he questions himself and thinks maybe there is more to it. And so I do see that guy in Casino Royale who's willing to walk away. I see that guy laying his life down for Madeline and for his daughter. I don't think it's a stretch to go from A to B personally. Because I totally get where a lot of folks are coming from when they say, like, you shouldn't kill Bond. That's fine. I see that and I understand that. My perspective is we've had 24 films of Bond. Why not? Like if it works for you, which it does for me, I don't see a problem with it. I personally think I like seeing, and I think it is a good example for people to, if there's a 1% chance that my family is going to suffer because I leave this island, that's 1% too much.
If you get it on you, how do you get it off?
You know as well as I do that you can't. It's permanent. It's eternal. Which is why we have to destroy it. For Christ's sake, James, just get off the island. It's harmless unless you're near to the target.
Yeah. Well, that's not gonna work. Oh, God, oh, God.
Like, I'm taking this down with me. I'm protecting the people I love. I think sacrifice and laying your life down for others, I think that's a good example. Do I want to see that in every movie? No, I don't want to see that in every Bond film. But I think every now and then, this is a movie that I will throw on and enjoy, just because I like the journey and I like, Craig's my favorite Bond, so I'm biased for sure. But for me, it works for me.
Do you like the execution? The sort of the speeches on, to Q and on the phone, obviously to Madeline and Hans Zimmer's music and all this. Do you think it's a good execution as well?
Yeah, I think on a lot of rewatches, like I think there's a lot that's going on that for me makes a lot of sense as far as like, well, why didn't he leave? And then they schedule a strike after he's clear, and which is a fair question. But I think the wrench in that plan is you've got the Russian MiGs, you've got Russia, you've got Japan, you've got the Americans asking Mallory these questions. It kind of seems like it's now or never. Like you're not going to get close to this island again to make this strike. If Bond gets off that island, all these other countries have their eyes on this island now. So they're going to want to know what's going on. And he even said to Mallory, it's like if the world finds out what Heracles can do, they'll kill for it. So if these other world powers find out what this is and what it can do, they're going to get it. It's going to it's going to spread, proliferate. It's going to continue to spread. It's going to get worse. So it's now or never, from what I understand, and from all the dialogue between him and Mallory. So it's like, hey, it's now or never. You got to take this stuff out. And yeah, the stuff with Madeline, I think it calls back also to the beginning of the film because she's going to tell him about Safin, who's been this cloud over her whole life. He's looking over his shoulder for Spectre. She even says that you can't help but look over your shoulder.
You can't help looking over your shoulder.
What?
No one's coming.
I wasn't looking over my shoulder.
Yes, you were.
No. Are we going to have a row about this?
And at the end of the film, Spectre's all gone. Safin's gone. She even says, like, there's nothing to hurt us now. And tragically, there is. Like, he's the curse. If he steps off that island, eventually that's going to kill them. Like he can't just like go on and do more missions and just not hug them. Like the whole point of Heracles is it's not going to stop. You touch one person, Safin even says that anyone we touch, we're their curse. It's going to get back to them eventually. So I think it's tragic that all the things they've been looking over their shoulder for are gone, but he's the last thing that's kind of holding them back.
It's a good argument, Kevin. It's amazing to think that these things you're talking about are in a Bond film for me. About sort of poison and all the trying to it's you just if you take a step back, you're like, how have we got here? But it does. I still think it works within the film. I think when you just see the film in isolation, beginning, middle, and end, that kind of thing, and if there was one actor to have a death, I think only Daniel Craig could even begin to carry it off. Because it does fit in with his arc more than any other, doesn't it?
Yeah. And don't hate me for this. I think Dalton pull it off. Like I think he's the only other one that could do it.
Yeah.
I genuinely think you could kind of like drop him into these scenarios and he could pull it off as well. But yes, I think for me, I think it's fitting. And I think it takes the sting out of it a little bit more because this isn't the same Bond from 1 through 20, right? This is
absolutely
a different Bond. So it kind of lessens the sting for me a little bit. Whereas it's like, well, why not? We have this other story, this other Bond who didn't know Tracy, who didn't know these other, maybe he knew other villains that we know and love, but I personally don't mind the chance.
Yeah, because you couldn't have Bond dies at the end of Dawn of the Day, could you? I mean, that'd be it, wouldn't it? What on earth would it? You couldn't recover from that, I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah.
I think with the delays that have been going on, with getting another with Bond 26 off the ground, I think that's kind of putting salt in the wound for a lot of people. I think when we get new movies eventually, get these new games out there from IO, I guess, Interactive, once you kind of get that that train going again, perhaps it'll be a situation where people can look back on it. But
Yeah,
that's not to say that anybody who doesn't like it is wrong. Because once again, like I totally get if it doesn't work for somebody. It's none of these 25 films work for everybody. That's why
Yeah.
we have 25 films that work for different people.
I
Well,
agree with that. Just when it's the last film, the one you left with, it's more difficult. Sorry, yeah.
And we waited what, like a year and a half when it was supposed to come out in April of 2020.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I will say this, just not to get sappy, but around that time when all these delays came out, that's when I started to get more active on Twitter. I was kind of like in the shadows, just kind of liking Thunderballs every now and then. But that was a scary time, but also like a cool time to like connect with really double oh
Mm.
007 and other people in the Bond community. And even though, we don't all agree on the outcome of No Time to Die, it was fun to
Yeah.
anticipate it and, do
Yeah.
all these things. So I'm grateful for the movie in that regard too.
That's a very good point. That, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it was like an end, daylight at the end of COVID, wasn't it? It was like, yes, we're
Yeah.
going to get the film at the cinema. We can watch it together. James Bond is returning.
I've got loads of problems with it, and they're probably the same as what lots of people have. Um, I do love hearing Kevin
Yeah.
talking about the things that work for him and for you know, and without sounding like I'm sucking up to you too much on Twitter. You're not someone who I see particularly goes in for debate, but when you're watching a Bond film or any other film, you celebrate the things that you like about it. You don't say this bit's rubbish or like us, like Purvis and Wade are useless or something like. It's all good. So I do appreciate that, and thank you for what you've just said about No Time to Die. Um, for me, I think so. I think amongst the Bond fans, loads of this and the ending is divisive and might not be that fitting finale for Craig. But I think the percentage of people who think it is a fitting finale amongst, you know, casual viewers is much higher. I can't think of any of my mates I've spoken to who've said, "Oh, No Time to Die was rubbish. Like that was all a bit contrived or anything like that." They said, "No, I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was good." And you've got to think. I think we discussed this with Warren from Cue the Music about who they get to do a Bond song. Um, it's the same with the films. They're not producers are quite rightly not aiming them all at us guys, us Bond fans who will go along and watch any Bond film they put out, but to wider public. And I think they did. I don't think they did the best job they could have done in that regard, but they did a decent enough job that people went to see it and people were satisfied. And I've said before about modern audiences are different. I do think they expect there to be more threads between films than they previously did, rather than just episodic where we start again and it's a new mission and new Bond girl and everything, new villain. I do think modern audiences expect them to be connected and for there to be a kind of start, a middle, and an end. And I would say that the producers don't have to pander to that as much as they think they need to. And I think superheroes have been dying recently in their films, so this then followed. So it wasn't as much of a shock as if that wouldn't have happened. It did feel a bit like they were following that, but I don't completely hate this film. I'll be honest. I hate some of the things that they do in it, but I don't hate this film. I think it's less boring than Spectre. I think there's more stuff to be enjoyed. Great locations. It does rattle along at a pretty good pace, much better than Spectre in that regard as well. And also, as we've said, Harry missed out because he had COVID, or someone he loves had COVID, and therefore there was a percentage chance that he could have passed it on to him. Or sorry, no, I'm just being cynical about Harry, please. But no, Harry couldn't join us. But we'd started this Bond podcast. Tom had started it, and then after a year, we'd just about been able to all meet up together, which we hadn't been able to, and then we could go and see a new Bond film together, and that was a really special time, I thought. And so for that reason alone and others, I don't hate this film. And as I say, for some Bond fans, not the majority, I would say, at best 50-50, but for the large majority of the cinema going public, this did work as a finale for him.
Fletcher, did you predict that he was going to die?
Not at all.
Oh,
I mean, when Bond has been a part of your life, your whole life, and he's survived every possible attempt at death, um, I just didn't see this coming. That being said, I wasn't too mad at it actually. I think because by this point I already knew that the Craig era was its own thing, and this was being touted as Craig's last. So I suppose, at the end of it, whatever happens, happens. Bond will return. So whether he lives or not, we're still getting a new Bond regardless. Going back to what Steve said about the Navy taking Bond out. I mean, I suppose that was interesting. I mean, with all the close calls that he's had, you know, doing what he does for Queen slash King now and country, um, it's got taken out by his own team. Obviously not intentionally, but it's just the circumstance of it all is quite tragic. But yeah, going back to what Math was saying as well regarding Bond dying, when you look at how the films, or at least Craig's era is, interconnected, you've got, your Marvel movies that have their threads, everything's all connected, and then you've got, you know, Iron Man, Tony Stark, the biggest of them all, sacrificing his life, and how that
What?
resonated with audiences. So, so,
no,
so,
I'm joking. I'm joking.
I was like, oh crap. But so I'm thinking maybe Eon were looking at something like that in terms of how Bond's death could resonate with audiences. Um, yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I'm actually quite surprised that I wasn't too bothered by it. I just would have preferred for him to, have been, for him to die through other means, considering all the stuff that he's done. That also being said, when we look at where he started in Casino Royale through now, um, this is a guy that's been, and I'm talking about Bond, not Craig, actually. This is a guy that's been trying to sort of get out of his job in almost every movie. In Casino Royale, he resigns. Quantum of Solace, sort of goes rogue. And I'm pretty sure that he knows that if he goes rogue, he's going to be reprimanded to the point where he gets suspended, or, he's asked to go and leave. Skyfall, he gets shot, whatever, and then, sulks in Turkey, doesn't bother coming back to work. End of Spectre, he retires. Do you know what I mean? So this guy's
yeah,
literally been trying to get out of his job since the very beginning.
just kill me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, and he has that I hate to steal this line from M, but he has that real cavalier attitude towards his own life, where I mean, even in Quantum, where he just about survives that parachute fall. Um, yeah, I mean, his death, I could sort of see coming. I didn't want it to happen, but it happened, and I'm not too surprised. So um, and lastly, I suppose the last thing I want to say about the film is what I found straight. So it's not that I don't like No Time to Die. I just find it to be a strange film, mainly because Bond does a lot of talking compared to
Yeah,
compared to the previous four. The monologues that he gives and all of this stuff. I just found it really bizarre to see.
We both know what it feels like to have everything taken from us before we're even in the fight. It would have been nice to have a chance, don't you think? Just, you all should get a chance. But this thing that you're building, it puts everyone, the whole world on a battlefield. Nobody gets a chance.
Because I'm not used to Craig speaking as Bond speaking that often. And when I look back at his predecessors, Connery spoke, Lazenby, Moore, Brosnan, Dalton. They all spoke quite often. So why is it weird that Craig is speaking a lot, but it just seems a bit jarring to me? I think it's because he's always had a sort of economy of words in his previous films, and it just felt strange to see. So
Because like his interrogation of Blofeld is like that feels really unusual
yeah,
and out of place.
yeah, exactly. When he reconnects with Madeline back in, is it Norway?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
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 And then he's professing his love and all of that stuff. Yeah, it just, I mean, it's a very human Bond that we've seen, that we sort of see for the very first time.
For what felt like 5 minutes of my life, I wanted everything with you. And it's not because I didn't trust. It's just that feeling. Now I've come here to find out who gave you the poison. But I'm not going to leave here without you knowing that I have loved you, and I will love you, and I do not regret a single moment of my life that led me to you. Except when I put you on that train.
Even with Vesper, Bond didn't really speak that much. But in this case, you couldn't shut him up. So
Couldn't shut him up.
But yeah, so I mean, I enjoy the film. I mean, it's definitely not in my top 15. And for a long time, I was always debating which one do I like less, Spectre or No Time to Die, and they sort of hover around each other. But I think I'll have to give it to Spectre and being my least favorite.
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually just thought then, no one's compared it to The Spy Who Loved Me, where, of course, they're going to bomb Stromberg's base at the end. Is the time to go back and save her? Otherwise, Bond would have been killed by the Navy again. Yeah. Right, go on, Chris.
I think there's no denying that there's a lot to like in there, and some of the filmmaking is top notch. But again, for me, the issues around the writing, I think the quality of the it sort of reeks of too many cuts. There's just too many different writers trying to put their own kind of fingerprints on it. I think it's just a little. There's a lot going on in that film. And like I say, it moves at certainly a better pace than Spectre. And there's some really interesting stuff, like obviously the opening, with Safin, the sort of flashback was like really interesting and really well made. Whether it was necessary to see that, I don't know. I think we'd already, as a filmmaking, almost as a short film, I think it's a great piece of filmmaking. But was it really necessary? Did we have to see it? We were already told about it. It's going to be referenced again. It's that kind of the economy of filmmaking that we had from Doctor No onwards. It seems to have been lost in terms of the filmmaking language when it comes to editing. That you don't always have to show everything, you don't always have to explain everything, and that's the issue I've had with the last few of them. Is that they've got really, just really baggy. I think that there's a lot the emotional side of this. I don't think he's earned for me really. I don't buy into this kind of like love story. I think Bond does bizarre things, like obviously in the opening in the DB5, it's like. Only an idiot would believe that. Again, it's like I don't understand.
James, why would I betray you?
We all have our secrets. We just didn't get to yours yet.
This is the problem that I have is I start to be really cynical because the only reason people are behaving that way is because the writers want them to do that, not because they understand what their characters are and they come across as three-dimensional.
James! James!
And that's also with the issue with the ending, is that it feels like, right, we've made that decision. What's the easiest way to actually show it on screen? Well, we were going to do it this way. When really, if Daniel Craig decided that that character was going to die, like Fletcher said, much more interesting ways of doing it, and much more dramatic ways of doing it. And I feel that this sort of leaning into the emotional story, I don't find it particularly convincing. I think, and I don't think they found that particularly convincing, which is why they're starting to lift the motifs and the music from a film that is much more emotional, which is On Her Majesty's Secret Service, as a crutch, because the writing just isn't good enough to actually, for you to find that personally emotional. So that's why it starts tugging at the heartstrings. And like Harry said, it becomes quite sort of manipulative.
How's the view?
It's growing on me. Can you go faster?
We don't need to go faster. We have all the time in the world.
Daniel Craig's performance is probably the most fun he looks like he's had on screen. Real moments where he actually feels light. There's a lightness to him where he feels like he's actually enjoying it. And there's some great scenes, great set pieces. All the issues around the story, about how it's written, how the characters, some of the dialogue. Like I say, just for the past few years, the scripts are just not up to scratch. Even if you look back at some of the stuff that like Tom Mankiewicz did, where you could question that, oh well, some of the plots of these are getting really ridiculous. But you know what? If you forget about the silly plots, you've still got absolutely grade A, triple star dialogue, and where it's like, this is really great writing, and I feel that we've lacked that snappiness, I think, in recent years. But yeah, I think I suppose in some respects, I'd say it's a fitting end to Daniel Craig's tenure.
Very hard to know what to say, but I thought we should gather and remember, and I thought this was appropriate. The function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days trying to prolong them. I shall use my time. To James.
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 James. Right. Back to work.
Keep watching our Daniel Craig retrospective, where we discuss his legacy.